I hope you don't hate desert areas in video games too much, because we are going to spend quite a bit of time in this one. Well, at least the music kicks ass, I guess. And now, before moving on, there is something I would like to mention that I talked about a few videos ago. I was talking about gaming networks in general, and Machinima in particular, and I remember mentioning Machinima's horrible business practices, and quite frankly, I know what's wrong with them, but it's not something that I can easily put into words. So, one of my regulars, Darkblaze6, referred a few others of my regulars to a video that does a pretty good job of explaining what's wrong with Machinima, and since a few of you actually asked me that question, I'm going to refer you to that video as well. I'm going to put a link in the movie description so you can watch it at your own leisure. Remember, though, that it's about half an hour long, so if you don't have that much time to dedicate to it, you might want to give it a miss. Anyway, moving on. We are still in the desert, and I only covered 2 Pokemon that can be found here. So how about I tell you all about the others that can be found here? And why not talk about the one we're looking at right now, Sigilyph. Sigilyph is just a Pokemon that I really like for no apparent reason. It's not an absolutely stellar Pokemon, but when it comes right down to it, it gets the job done really well. Its defenses are average, but combined with Magic Guard, it actually becomes fairly decent because you are immune to all sources of indirect damage. Now, indirect damage is much more common competitively than it is in-game, but it's still quite an asset, especially when you're grinding in an area that has a permanent sandstorm, like I'm doing now. So yeah, the defenses are somewhat serviceable. The speed is pretty good. Competitively, if it were just a wee bit faster, it would be amazing, because being just a few points under that 100 threshold, unfortunately, makes a rather big difference. The offense is pretty decent as well. Once again, nothing stellar, but it's the combination of everything. You know, it can put stuff to sleep with Hypnosis, it can recover HP on its own with Roost, and I know that I have access to items in-game for healing, but I don't know. I'm just a sucker for Pokemon that can recover HP on their own. Maybe it's just my competitive side talking, but it's really something that I like. So, Burn Heal, yeah, in the desert. Guess it's sort of appropriate, I guess. And one thing about Sigilyph is that, well, look at it. I'm going to send it out right now. Look at it. On top of its head or body or whatever, there's a freaking unknown there, an eye-shaped unknown. So, yeah, I have a theory about Sigilyph. It may be wrong. I'm not saying it's fact. It's just a theory. What I'm thinking is that it was originally meant as an unknown evolution, sort of like Alomomola with Love Disc, but okay. Oh, I thought it was a sign for some stupid reason. But yeah, eventually they decided to just reboot the whole thing and separate the new Pokemon from the old completely. And so the end result is what you're seeing right now, the resulting Sigilyph. I think what they were originally going for was that, that is, if my theory is correct, which it might not, is that they were going for all 28 different forms of Sigilyphs with unknowns atop their bodies. So, for example, you could have a Z-shaped unknown at the top of Sigilyph, and it would be the Z Sigilyph. You get the idea. This is what I think happened, but this is just a crazy theory of mine, because that thing on it looks way too much like an unknown to not be a coincidence. But moving on, another Pokemon that's quite popular that a lot of people catch for their teams in this area, a lot of people use it for Berg, in fact, is Darumaka, which evolves into Darmanitan, one of the hardest hitters in the game, thanks to its massive special attack. Not special attack, physical attack! What am I saying? Its special attack is shit! But yeah, massive physical attack, as well as sheer force, which provides a 30% boost to all moves with added effects. and that includes Flare Blitz, not because of the recoil. Recoil doesn't count as an added effect, but because of the 10% chance of a burn. That is why Darmanitan is right up there with Medicham and Azumarill, and also Marowak as some of the hardest hitters in the game. Now, all of those Pokemon have their issues, but Darmanitan deals with them better than most, because its speed, well, once again, is just barely below the all-important 100 threshold. It's at like 95 or something like that. If it was just a little wee bit faster, it would be absolutely amazing. It would be overused most definitely, but unfortunately, it's not. And Darmanitan is, well, sort of frail. It has a lot of HP to use as ammo for Flare Blitz in the purest style first made popular by Staraptor, but its defenses are pretty meh. At least it can keep firing those Flare Blitzes for a while, but otherwise, it's not the bulkiest Pokemon out there, though it's definitely not the most frail either if you're careful with your Flare Blitz. And, oh, turns out these guys aren't even, they're not even trainers, so why did I dodge them so avidly on my first time through to begin with? But yeah, the reason why I am not using Darmanitan on this run, well, it's one of those Pokemon that I seriously considered, but instead I decided to use something else. So I'm not using any fire types in this run, so am I done with Route 4 right now? Yep, looks like it, so we can move on to the desert resort proper. So yeah, what I was saying, the reason why I'm not using one is because, well, I'm not terribly fond of drawback moves in-game, and while Darmanitan's Flare Blitz is extremely powerful, it still eats through HP a little too fast for my liking. Now there's Fire Punch, which works pretty well as well, I guess I should say. But once again, a 30% boost on Fire Punch, it's still below 100 power. So compared to Flamethrower, it's sort of meh. But if you actually do plan on using a Darmanitan in-game, make sure you give it both Fire Punch for those non-life or death situations, and Flare Blitz for when you really, really need the extra power. I don't often recommend using two moves of the same type, but that would be one such case in my opinion. Now, this trainer I'm fighting is a doctor, and finally we have one with a pretty decent placement right at the entrance of the desert resort, you know, as opposed to the one that was at the very entrance of Pinwheel Forest that was actually sort of insulting in a way. But yeah, this guy's positioning is pretty good. You can come back to him every time you're injured instead of having to go all the way back to Castelia, which is cool. This is something that I'm definitely going to make use of. So moving on, because I still have a few Pokemon I have to talk about. Maractus! You know, most generations, except maybe for Generation 2, introduce a weak grass type that doesn't really do much of anything. We've had Tangela, we've had Tropius, we've had Carnivine, and now we have Maractus. Other than its special attack, its stats are nothing to write home about, and its offense is, on the special side, is grass, 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 grass. Grass for days. Oh, and the hyper voice, which it happened to pick up in Black and White too. But other than that, it's grass. It has slightly better coverage on the physical side of things, a bit like Superior in Black and White too. But once again, it's just not worth writing home about. Just don't use it. There are several good grass types to use in this game. If you don't like Lilligant, the one I'm using right now, there are alternatives like Sawsbuck and Virizion. Just don't bother with Maractus. Now, next up, lots of different Pokemon in this desert, huh? Next up we have Dwebble, which we've already seen a few times. It evolves into Crustle, which is not such a memorable Pokemon. It's not a complete disaster. It's got pretty high defense for one, and Bug Rock is one of the rare rock subtypings that isn't completely worthless defensively, which is maybe why I'm such a huge sucker for Cradily, no pun intended. But Otherwise, Crustle, it's a bit different from Cradily, in that, well, you know those boosting moves like Shell Smash and Quiver Dance and stuff like that? Well, usually they're so good that they're going to be what defines the Pokemon that get them. And, quite frankly, Crustle is no exception. Though it's sort of a shame to let that awesome defense stat go to waste if you want to use an attacking Crustle. It's a very good idea because its attack is pretty decent from the get-go, and its speed could use a serious boost, so that bastard confused me. I'm not going to take any chances. I'm just going to send out Excadrill and hope it doesn't fire off another Confuse Ray. Nope, Crunch. So yeah, I'm good. So this is something I recommend doing whenever you get confused. You waste a turn switching, but they also just wasted a turn confusing you, which is why it's not very recommendable competitively. But yeah, I was talking about Crustle. Another thing that it can really do well, aside from Shell Smash, well, it does it really well compared to the other stuff it can do. But yeah, it can be pretty good at laying down spikes and Stealth Rock. It's rarely used, if I remember, and it's a pretty decent Pokemon to use. So yeah, if you want to use a really exotic Pokemon that no one ever thinks of using, you might want to consider Crustle, even though it's really slow, to be honest. So I wouldn't really recommend it in-game either way. So I just got the Soft Sand, which is going to be a really good item to give to my Excadrill. So if you give me a second, I'm going to shuffle my items around a bit. I'm going to give the Soft Sand to Excadrill, which had the Scope Lands. And I'm going to give the Scope Lands to Sigilif in turn, because the Quick Claw just isn't doing too much for it. The fun thing about the Quick Claw notice is that you get notice that it worked even when the opponent uses an item or a priority move, as you saw a few times this video. Now, these things, I finally get to talk about these things. They look like statues of Pokemon, and we're gonna get into those ruins later, don't worry, but those statues, there are 6 of them. These things are Darmanitans in their, well, I wouldn't say exactly alternate form, because I don't count them as alternate forms proper, but those are Darmanitans that have the Zen Mode ability instead of Sheer Force. You don't want to bother with Zen Mode Darmanitan, ever! Because not only do you lose out on the essential Sheer Force, but you also get a shitty ability in exchange, which hinders you more than it helps you, because Zen Mode completely changes your stat spread when you're below half health. So, and by that I mean, normal Darmanitan is a physical behemoth, but Zen Mode Darmanitan's thing is really a special attack, so you want to have to plan for both forms, which, well, you really don't want to get into that changing stat spreads mid-fight, as I remember that I forgot to reactivate the dowsing machine. There's something right here, an ether, okay. So, yeah, just don't. If you use Darmanitan, it's gotta be with Sheer Force. Otherwise, you don't want to use it at all. And by the way, I couldn't do anything with those statues just now because they require a Rage Candy Bar to activate, which can only be done later on in the game. If I recall, is the Rage Candy Bar still a key item in this game? No, it's not. It was only in Hard Gold and Soul Silver, so it's a regular item once again in this game, and you can use it to awaken those statues of Darmanitan. Though, once again, I don't know why you would actually catch them other than for rarity, because this is the only way you will ever get a Zen Mode Darmanitan, so if you desperately want one in your collection, then that's the way to do it. So I'm going to finish off this trainer, and that's going to be all for today. But right now, I just want to remind you that even though I said in the last video that my uploading schedule was going to be a little more scarce, yes, I'm uploading a video today, but it could happen that I'm going to upload 2 or 3 days in a row, then you get nothing for like a full week. It's something that could happen, so I'm warning you right now that this can happen. So, next time on Let's Play Pokemon White, we're going to continue exploring the desert resort, and maybe start exploring the ruins that are located on the far side of it. See you next time!